Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back 2,300 years into the dusty streets of ancient Macedonia, where Alexander's empire is changing the world, but you're just trying to survive until sunset. The smell of olive oil lamps and freshly baked barley bread fills your nostrils as you wake on your straw mattress, already sweating in the Mediterranean heat. Your wooden cup sits empty, your stomach growls, and outside your mud brick home, an empire is expanding while you wonder if you'll have enough drachmas for dinner. Most history books won't tell you that the average Macedonian commoner died before age 35. You probably won't survive this either. Ready to experience what daily life was really like for the forgotten people who built Alexander's legacy? Morning awakening in a Macedonian home. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes open to darkness, broken only by thin beams of sunlight filtering through wooden shutters. The scent of last night's olive oil lamp still hangs in the air, a slightly sweet, slightly smoky smell that clings to everything in your home. You blink a few times, adjusting to the dim light, trying to ignore the dull ache spreading across your lower back from sleeping on what is essentially a sack of straw. You're lying on your sleeping mat in the corner of your single-room mud brick house. The space around you is crowded. Your parents sleep near the opposite wall. Your siblings are scattered across the floor in between. And yes, that's definitely a goat breathing heavily in the corner. Sharing your home with livestock isn't ideal, but the body heat is welcome during colder months, and it's safer than leaving the animals outside where they might be stolen. Your throat feels like sandpaper, dry and scratchy in the already building heat of early morning. The thin woolen blanket that seemed adequate when you fell asleep now feels stifling, and you push it aside. Your first conscious thought is about water. You need it badly, but getting it means a trip to the communal well. Outside, Macedonia is coming alive. Through the cracks in your wooden door, you hear the shuffle of neighbors already heading to their daily tasks. Someone's child is crying, probably being dragged unwillingly to help with chores. In the distance, the rhythmic clanging of the blacksmith's hammer creates a familiar backbeat to morning. The chickens next door sound particularly demanding today. Their owner must be running late with their feed. The smell of your home hits you fully now that you're awake. A mixture of the stored grains in clay pots along the wall, dried herbs hanging from the low ceiling beams, and the earthy scent of the packed dirt floor beneath you. There's also the faint but unmistakable smell of human bodies that have gone too long without proper washing. Your family's collective scent that visitors would notice, but you've long since gotten used to. Your wooden cup sits empty beside your sleeping mat, a reminder that water is the first essential task of your day. The communal well is about 100 paces from your home, and the morning line will already be forming. Good water is everything in Macedonia. Disease spreads quickly when people drink from contaminated sources, and the summer fever took 3 children from your street last year. You glance around your home, still adjusting to the dim light. Unlike modern houses with their multiple rooms and specialized spaces, your Macedonian dwelling is just one open area where everything happens. The hearth sits in the center, currently cold with only gray ashes remaining from last night's cooking fire. A few clay pots and wooden implements are neatly stacked in one corner. Some pegs on the wall hold your family's spare tunics. 2 wooden stools and a low table constitute the only real furniture. Your entire life happens in this space. Cooking, eating, sleeping, socializing, all within these 4 simple walls. Your stomach growls loudly as you eye the small cloth covering the remaining barley bread from yesterday. Should you eat now or wait? Historians still argue whether common Macedonians ate breakfast regularly or saved their limited food supplies for later meals when energy was most needed. Your family typically follows the latter approach, especially when supplies are running low, which is most of the time. The last week of each month is always the hardest, when the previous market day's purchases have dwindled and before your father receives his next payment. Reluctantly, you push yourself up from your mat, wincing at the stiffness in your shoulders. Sleeping on straw is better than sleeping on bare earth, but not by much. Your body has never known the comfort of a proper bed, something only the wealthy enjoy. Surviving another day in Alexander's Macedonia means accepting the physical discomfort that comes with poverty. Complaining about it won't change anything. You stretch your arms above your head, feeling the satisfying pop of your spine. The morning air still holds a slight chill, but you know from experience that by midday the heat will become almost unbearable. This daily rhythm of cool mornings giving way to oppressive afternoons is written into your body's memory after years of adaptation. You plan your most strenuous tasks for the early hours, knowing that the heat will sap your strength later. Your family members are beginning to stir now. Your mother is already up, silently reigniting the hearth fire from carefully preserved embers. Your younger sister rolls over, trying to steal the warmth from the spot you just vacated. Your father coughs, that same persistent cough he's had for months now. You try not to worry about it, but you've seen other men in the village develop similar coughs that never improved until they couldn't work anymore. The day ahead stretches before you, fetching water, helping with household tasks, then heading to the fields or workshop depending on the season. Each day blends into the next in an endless cycle of basic survival, but for now, the most pressing concern is relieving your painfully full bladder and finding something to quench your thirst. Another day in Alexander's Macedonia has begun, and you're already behind schedule. Morning hygiene and preparation. You creep quietly across the room, careful not to wake your siblings as you reach for a clay pot in the corner. Inside is yesterday's collected rainwater. Not everyone in your neighborhood bothers to collect it, making your morning wash a small luxury that many skip entirely. You dip your fingers into the cool water and splash some on your face, the sensation momentarily refreshing against your skin. This small pleasure marks the beginning of your daily routine. Cleaning yourself in Macedonia bears absolutely no resemblance to the bathrooms you're familiar with. There's no soap, no running water, no scented products in pretty bottles. Just this, a quick rinse of your hands and face with collected water. You rub your wet fingers over your gritty eyes, washing away the sleep and grime that accumulated overnight. The water in the pot turns slightly brown as you continue your minimal ablutions. Even this basic cleanliness puts you ahead of some of your neighbors. Your mouth feels particularly unpleasant this morning. You run your tongue over your teeth, feeling the rough texture and tasting the sourness of your breath. Despite being relatively young, your teeth already show concerning signs of decay. Several ache constantly, and one molar in the back has been sensitive for months. You grab a small piece of rough cloth, dampen it with water, and rub it over your teeth. This does little more than remove the most visible food particles. The cloth catches on a chipped front tooth, a permanent reminder of a childhood fall that never properly healed. At least I still have most of my teeth, you mutter, thinking of your uncle who lost nearly all of his by age 30. Next, you reach for a small vial tucked safely on a high shelf. It contains olive oil mixed with crushed herbs, thyme, rosemary, and several others your mother collects from the hillsides. This isn't for cooking, though. You pour a small amount into your palm and begin rubbing it onto your exposed skin. The oil helps mask your body odor while providing some protection against the harsh Macedonian sun. The herbal scent is pleasant, certainly better than your natural smell after days of minimal washing. Your thoughts drift to the public baths in Pella, the capital city you visited only twice in your life. The wealthier citizens visit these baths weekly, soaking in heated water, having slaves scrape oils from their skin, enjoying actual cleanliness. For you, a commoner, such luxuries remain completely out of reach most of the time. You might visit the public bath once or twice a year during festivals or special occasions. The rest of the time, you make do with these simple washing rituals. The familiar itch at your scalp reminds you of another unpleasant morning task. Lice, those tiny blood-sucking parasites, have been your constant companions since childhood. You grab a wooden comb and begin running it through your hair, pausing occasionally to inspect the tiny creatures caught in the teeth. With practiced efficiency, you crush them between your fingernails, the small popping sound oddly satisfying. It's a never-ending battle. You'll never be completely free of them, but keeping their numbers manageable is the best you can hope for. Everyone has lice, you remind yourself. Even Alexander himself probably scratches his royal head. Your clothing options for the day are predictably limited. You own 2 chitons, tunics, one made of rough-spun wool for cooler weather and another of slightly lighter linen for summer. Today, with the heat already building, you select the linen one. The fabric is worn thin in places from years of washing and mending. You slip it over your head and secure it at the shoulders with simple wooden pins. The garment hangs to just below your knees, practical for working and moving around. No undergarments, no socks, no complicated fastenings, just this single layer between you and the world. Before completing your morning routine, you remember the small pouch of dried herbs your grandmother insists you use. You take a pinch of the mixture, crush it between your fingers, and rub it vigorously across your gums. The bitter taste makes you wince, but you endure it stoically. Some Macedonian commoners believe this prevents tooth loss, a folk remedy passed down through generations. The tingling sensation and temporarily fresher breath seem worth the momentary discomfort. Historians still argue whether these herbal remedies had any real effect, but surprisingly, some did contain natural antiseptic properties that help fight infection. Your morning hygiene routine complete, you feel somewhat refreshed despite the primitive methods. It's remarkable how humans adapt to their circumstances. What would seem shockingly inadequate to someone from the future feels entirely normal to you. The small rituals provide a sense of control and dignity in a world where you control precious little else. You step outside your home, blinking in the brightening sunlight. Your neighbors are emerging from their dwellings as well, all of you united by the same limited access to what modern people would consider basic sanitation. Everyone smells roughly the same, a mixture of body odor, partially masked by oils and herbs. No one notices or comments on it because this is simply how humans smell in your world. The concept of being clean, in the modern sense, doesn't exist here. A neighbor nods a greeting as he passes, his teeth visibly decayed, his hair just as lice-ridden as yours. You return the nod, neither of you remarking on these shared conditions. This is life in Macedonia, making the best of limited resources, finding small comforts where possible, and accepting the rest as simply the way things are. Your daily hygiene routine, humble as it may be, has prepared you to face another day in Alexander's world. Breakfast and early morning tasks. The morning sun now fully visible, you join your family around the small hearth where your mother has rekindled last night's embers into a modest cooking fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls as everyone gathers, bleary-eyed but driven by hunger. Your stomach growls loudly enough that your sister shoots you a knowing look. Everyone's hungry, but not everyone needs to announce it quite so dramatically. "Come sit," your mother says, gesturing to the open space beside her. She's stirring a pot of simple barley porridge, the staple that begins most of your days when you're fortunate enough to have breakfast at all. The porridge bubbles thickly, its bland appearance improved only slightly by the thin drizzle of olive oil your mother carefully adds. On special days, there might be honey, but today is not special. Your younger siblings push and shove each other, fighting over the last small piece of cheese that your mother has divided among the family. Their voices rise until your father clears his throat, a sound you all recognize as a warning. "That's enough," he says firmly. "Food must be carefully rationed until the next market day. We don't know if I'll find work tomorrow." His words hang heavy in the air. Everyone understands the precarious nature of your family's situation. One bad week can mean empty stomachs for days. Your mother hands you a wooden bowl of porridge and a chunk of yesterday's bread. The bread has hardened overnight, so you dip it into the small cup of watered wine that accompanies your breakfast. The wine, even diluted as it is, helps soften the stale bread and makes it easier to chew with your already troubled teeth. "Can I have more wine?" your youngest brother asks, having finished his small portion. Your father shakes his head. "It's already watered down 3 parts water to 1 part wine. Any more wine would be barbaric." You smile at this common saying. Drinking undiluted wine is something only the truly uncivilized would do, at least according to Macedonian sensibilities. The practice of watering wine serves both to stretch this valuable resource and to maintain proper social boundaries. Your family may be poor, but you're not savages. As you eat, the conversation flows in your family's distinct Macedonian dialect, the words flowing with a rhythm and accent that immediately identifies you as commoners from the northern reaches of Alexander's expanding empire. You've heard the way Athenian merchants sometimes mimic this speech when they visit your village, their exaggerated imitations drawing laughs from their companions. It's a source of quiet resentment, but also regional pride. Your dialect may be considered crude by Southern standards, but it's yours. "Phaedra, after you eat, check on the chickens," your mother instructs your sister. "And you," she says, turning to you, "gather whatever eggs there might be." You nod, finishing the last of your porridge and using your finger to collect any remnants from the sides of your wooden bowl. Archaeologists generations from now will discover that Macedonian commoners like you primarily ate from wooden vessels rather than the pottery used by wealthier citizens. It's a practical choice. Wood doesn't shatter when dropped, an important consideration in households with young children and limited resources. You step outside into the growing warmth of the day and make your way to the small chicken coop at the back of your home. Your family keeps 3 chickens, their eggs providing a crucial supplement to your diet. You reach carefully under each hen, retrieving the warm eggs and placing them gently in your woven basket. Today there are only 2, not a great yield, but better than nothing. These will either become part of tonight's meal or be traded at the market for something else your family needs. When you return inside, your father is discussing news with your uncle, who has stopped by on his way to the fields. They say Alexander's army has reached a land where the rivers flow with gold and men ride on beasts larger than houses, your uncle says, his eyes wide with wonder. Your father nods but seems less impressed. "And what does that mean for us? Will our taxes be lower? Will there be more work? Will the price of grain come down?" Your uncle has no answers for these practical questions. Like most news of Alexander's campaigns, these stories feel distant from your daily concerns. The great king may be conquering the world, but your world remains small and largely unchanged by his triumphs. "Show me the eggs," your mother says when you return, skillfully changing the subject away from politics. She inspects them briefly before placing them in a small clay container. "Good enough. Now help your sister with the water." With breakfast complete, however modest, you feel a small surge of energy. The simple pleasure of food in your belly provides momentary satisfaction, making the harsh realities of life in Macedonia seem a little more bearable. Your wooden bowl goes into a bucket of water to soak. Cleaning will happen later when more important tasks are done. Your family begins to disperse to their morning duties. Your father heads out to seek day labor at the construction site near the edge of town. Your mother sends the youngest children to collect kindling. Your older brother has already left for his apprenticeship with the tanner. Everyone has a role, a task, a purpose in keeping the household functioning. Even at 8 years old, your youngest sister has specific chores assigned to her. There's no concept of a childhood free from labor in your world. From the moment children can walk steadily, they become contributors to the family's survival. You watch her small hands working diligently to sort lentils, removing tiny stones that might break someone's tooth. Her childhood is no different from yours was. Work, learn the skills needed for survival, prepare for a life that will likely never extend beyond this village. You take a final sip of your watered wine, savoring the slightly sour taste before heading out to begin your own tasks for the day. This brief moment of family gathering now transitions to the separated labors that will occupy you until evening brings you all together again. Morning work and labor. You leave your house and make your way through the narrow, unpaved streets of your village. The path to work has become second nature. You instinctively sidestep a pile of animal waste without even looking down. Up ahead, a neighbor empties a chamber pot from her second-story window. You dodge the splashing contents with practiced ease, barely breaking stride. These hazards are just part of daily life in Macedonia, so unremarkable that you hardly notice them anymore. The morning sun climbs higher as you approach the pottery workshop, where you've been apprenticed since childhood. This isn't the romanticized version of ancient craft you might see in paintings. It's hard, physical labor that starts with preparing clay and ends with aching muscles. Your master, Theon, is already there, stoking the kiln fire to the right temperature for today's firing. "You're late," he grunts, though you're not. This is just his way of greeting everyone. Your morning begins, as it always does, with preparing tools and materials for the day ahead. You mix fresh clay with water in large vats, kneading it to the right consistency with your bare hands. The cool, wet clay feels good against your skin in the growing heat, but your back already protests as you bend and lift the heavy containers. Your shoulders ache from yesterday's work, a constant companion that never fully disappears. Everyone you know suffers from similar pains. It's simply part of survival. "Clay's too wet," Theon barks from across the workshop. "Add more dry." Physical pain is just background noise in your world. Complaining about it would be like complaining about the color of the sky. Useless. As you work, the sounds of the agora grow louder in the distance. The marketplace is coming alive as merchants set up their stalls for the day. Even through the workshop walls, you can hear them shouting prices and arguing with early customers. The familiar sound creates a chaotic symphony of commerce that forms the soundtrack to your mornings. 10 drachmas for this. "It's barely worth 5, someone shouts, their voice carrying across the square. "My children will starve at that price," comes the predictable response from the merchant. Through the workshop's open doorway, you notice a group of soldiers walking through the market. Their well-fed appearance and quality clothing stand in stark contrast to everyone else around them. They move with confidence, taking what they want from vendor stalls and leaving without paying full price. Who would argue with the king's men? The merchants smile tightly and say nothing as the soldiers pass, but their eyes follow the retreating figures with quiet resentment. One soldier catches you watching and holds your gaze for a moment. You quickly look down at your work, best not to be noticed. Your hands, calloused and permanently stained with clay, move with practiced efficiency as you begin shaping a simple water jug on the potter's wheel. Your fingernails are broken and discolored, your palms rough as tree bark. These are the hands of a craftsperson. not so different from the hands of potters who lived generations before you. The knowledge of this craft has been passed down through Macedonian families for centuries, each generation teaching the next the secrets of working clay into useful forms. Unlike the romanticized versions that might appear in history books, the actual work is monotonous. You'll shape dozens of nearly identical vessels today, each requiring the same repetitive motions. There's little creative expression in common pottery. People want reliable, functional pieces at prices they can afford. Your back and shoulders will ache from bending over the wheel for hours. Your hands will crack and bleed in the dry heat near the kiln. Your lungs will fill with clay dust that never fully clears. "Pass me that tool," says Demos, another potter working nearby. You hand him the wooden rib he's pointing at. This small interaction reminds you of something you've noticed over years of working here. Some scholars believe Macedonian craftspeople often formed informal guilds or work collectives, sharing resources and knowledge in ways not documented in official records. While there's no formal structure, there is an unspoken bond among the potters in your workshop. You share tools, help each other with difficult pieces, and warn each other about dishonest merchants. This silent cooperation makes survival possible in a world where official systems rarely protect people like you. Despite the difficulty and physical strain, your work provides a small sense of pride. When your hands shape clay into a vessel that will hold water or wine or oil, you're creating something tangible that helps sustain your family in Alexander's expanding empire. Each piece that survives the kiln firing represents income that puts food on your table. Each successful vessel is a tiny victory. "That one's good," Theon says, briefly examining your finished amphora with a critical eye. From him, this is high praise. The morning passes in a blur of productive activity. Your body moves through familiar motions, while your mind wanders. You think about what your mother might prepare for tonight's meal. You worry about the roof that needs patching before the rainy season. You wonder if you'll have enough money saved by winter to buy new sandals. The rhythm of the potter's wheel becomes almost meditative, allowing your thoughts to drift while your hands remain busy. Every now and then, Theon barks an order or correction, snapping you back to the present. The kiln fire crackles, clay dust hangs in the air, sweat drips down your back. This is your life, repetitive, physically demanding, and entirely unremarkable to history's writers. But these humble pots, created by countless unnamed hands like yours, will sustain Alexander's empire just as surely as his famous military victories. Midday meal and brief rest. The position of the sun directly overhead tells you what your growling stomach already knows. It's time for the midday break. You place your clay tools down and step away from the potter's wheel, stretching your aching back. In Macedonia, this pause isn't some generous gift from your master. It's a necessity. Working through the peak heat of a Mediterranean afternoon could literally kill you, something everyone understands without discussion. "Time to eat," Theon announces unnecessarily, already heading for the door. You follow the other workers outside, squinting against the sudden brightness. The day has become oppressively hot, the kind of heat that seems to press down on your shoulders and makes the air itself feel thick. Everyone instinctively moves toward the ancient olive tree that provides the only significant shade near the workshop. It's the same spot you eat every day, the ground beneath the tree packed down from years of workers sitting in exactly this pattern. You settle into your usual place and unwrap the simple meal you brought from home, carefully folded in a cloth. The contents are predictable. A chunk of barley bread that's already hardening in the dry air, 3 small olives, and a piece of salted fish barely the size of your thumb. You arrange these items on your lap, mentally calculating how to make them last. The food will be just enough to keep you working through the afternoon, but nowhere near enough to satisfy the hollow feeling in your stomach. Look at my portion today, groaned Stephanos, displaying his even smaller piece of fish. My wife says the merchant raised prices again, blames Alexander's new taxes, and just like that, the conversation turns to the topic always simmering beneath the surface: taxes. Every worker has a complaint, a story about how the latest collection has affected their family. My cousin had to sell his best goat, says Demetrios, the oldest worker. The tax collector wouldn't take partial payment this month. You nod in understanding. Alexander's military campaigns require constant funding, new weapons, supplies, payments to soldiers, and it's commoners who bear the heaviest burden relative to your means. While wealthy landowners certainly pay more in absolute terms, they barely notice the loss. For your family, each tax increase means deciding which necessity becomes a luxury you can no longer afford. At least we're winning, offers a younger worker optimistically. The others just look at him. You take a careful sip from your ceramic flask, the water inside now warm from hours in the sun. It tastes slightly metallic and does little to quench your thirst, but you drink it slowly, making it last. Water is precious, especially in midday heat that makes your tunic stick to your back with sweat. My brother returned from the Eastern campaign last month, says Nicias, who usually keeps to himself. Everyone perks up at this. News from the front is always interesting, even if it rarely affects your daily life. He says they have the strangest customs there. People eat lying down on couches. Lying down, someone asks. How do you keep food from spilling everywhere? The group chuckles at the impracticality of this foreign habit. The image of trying to eat your dinner while sprawled on a couch seems utterly ridiculous to people who've spent their lives eating quickly while sitting on the ground or on simple stools. Rich people's nonsense, Demetrios concludes with a dismissive wave. Try eating like that after a day making pots. You'd fall asleep before finishing your first bite. Everyone laughs in agreement. This shared moment of amusement creates a brief sense of camaraderie that makes these lunch breaks valuable beyond just the food. You notice how the workers naturally form a circle, everyone positioned to see each other's faces. Archaeologists generations from now will discover that Macedonian field workers and craftspeople often ate communally like this, sharing not just food but creating social bonds that helped communities survive hardship. Stephanos sometimes shares his wife's exceptional olives. Demetrios occasionally brings extra figs when his tree produces well. Today, seeing your meager portion, Nicias silently breaks his bread and passes half to you. You accept with a nod. Next time you have extra, you'll do the same for someone else. This informal system of sharing helps everyone survive when times are particularly hard. What's that on your arm? You ask Demetrios, noticing an angry red rash spreading across his forearm. He glances down and shrugs. Started after we began using that new purple dye from the East. Burns sometimes too. No one seems particularly concerned by this. Physical ailments are simply part of life, especially for those working with unfamiliar materials. Generations later, historians will still debate the toxic effects of ancient manufacturing processes on the workers who use them daily without protection. For now, it's just another occupational hazard no one has time to worry about. The brief rest period passes too quickly. Your body has cooled slightly in the shade, and the simple meal has given you just enough energy to face the afternoon's labor. The food provided necessary calories, if not satisfaction. Your hunger hasn't truly been addressed, but it's been temporarily subdued to a manageable level. Back to work, Theon calls, already heading toward the workshop. The brief respite is over. You carefully fold your empty cloth and tuck it into your belt. As you stand and brush crumbs from your tunic, you notice a group of wealthier citizens still leisurely eating in the shade of a nearby home. Their meal appears to include fresh meat, cheese, and wine served in proper cups rather than shared flasks. They recline comfortably on cushions, talking and laughing without concern for time. Some have slaves standing nearby, ready to fetch whatever they might desire. The contrast couldn't be clearer, a daily reminder of Macedonia's rigid social hierarchy. They will continue their meal and conversation while you return to labor in the stifling heat of the workshop. This division isn't something you question or rage against. It's simply the way the world is ordered, as fixed and unchangeable as the rising sun or the turning seasons. With a resigned sigh, you turn away from the scene and follow your fellow workers back to the pottery wheel, the brief midday respite already fading into memory. The afternoon sun beats down mercilessly as you return to your labor, sweat immediately soaking through your thin tunic despite the slight breeze. The workshop feels even hotter now, the air thick with clay dust that sticks to your damp skin. Your muscles already ache from the morning's work, and yet somehow the second half of the day always feels twice as long as the first. The worst tasks, the heavy lifting of finished pots to the drying racks, still lie ahead. Hurry up with that batch, Theon calls out. We need those amphoras dried by tomorrow. Their voices rise above the general hum of the marketplace. 40 drachmas for Egyptian linen. Last month it was 30, the customer shouts. The routes are more dangerous now. Pirates off the coast, bandits on the roads, the merchant fires back. Alexander expands east while our seas grow lawless. Arguments like this have become more common as Macedonia's economy shifts with imperial expansion. Goods from distant regions flow into your local markets, but prices fluctuate wildly as trade routes change and new taxes appear. What happens in far-off Persia somehow affects how much your mother pays for salt at the local market. The interconnectedness of this growing empire affects your daily life in ways you barely understand. Demos leans close as you both work side by side at your wheels. Did you hear about the tanner's daughter? He asks quietly. You shake your head, curious despite your exhaustion. She's marrying one of Alexander's soldiers next month. A lieutenant, not just some foot soldier. Her father's been strutting around like a peacock. This is interesting news. Marriage between different social classes isn't common and represents a rare opportunity for social advancement in your rigid society. The tanner's daughter will move from the working class into something approaching respectability. Her children might even learn to read. Her mother must be relieved, you comment. No more stinking hides and chemicals. Everyone knows the tanner's trade is among the worst for your health. Their skin turns yellow from the chemicals, and many die young from breathing the fumes. Yet even among commoners, there's a clear hierarchy. As potters, you consider yourselves several steps above tanners in the social order, though still far below merchants or soldiers. Your conversation halts as a foreign trader passes by the workshop entrance. He speaks to his companion in a language you don't recognize, something with harsh consonants and strange rhythms. His clothing is equally unfamiliar, with colorful patterns and cuts unlike anything made in Macedonia. Eastern, Theon says with a nod toward the stranger. From beyond the Indus, they say. The appearance of such foreigners has become increasingly common as Alexander's conquests connect previously distant regions. These traders bring exotic goods, strange customs, and occasionally useful knowledge. They also bring competition that sometimes threatens local craftspeople like you. By mid-afternoon, the repetitive motions of the potter's wheel have put you into an almost trance-like state. Your hands shape clay while your mind wanders. The monotony breaks when a small crowd gathers near the marketplace fountain. At its center stands a man in a traveler's cloak, gesturing dramatically, and then Alexander himself led the charge. The elephant reared up, its trunk lashing the air like a living whip, the man shouts, his voice carrying to your workshop. A traveling storyteller, always a welcome diversion. Theon pretends not to notice as workers slow their pace to listen. These tales of Alexander's exploits offer a glimpse into a world you'll never see firsthand. Though everyone knows storytellers embellish freely for dramatic effect, Their tales provide a connection to the larger empire beyond your village. The king took his sword, and with one mighty blow, the storyteller pauses dramatically while his audience leans forward. After a while, the afternoon's work resumes its normal rhythm. Several workers begin humming, then singing a familiar work song. The distinctive Macedonian melody has a steady rhythm perfectly suited to the turning of the potter's wheel. Others join in with the call and response pattern. Clay to wheel, wheel to fire, one voice calls. From dust to vessel, vessel to buyer, the group responds. These songs help synchronize group labor while providing distraction from physical discomfort. The familiar melodies create a sense of unity that makes the burdensome afternoon pass more quickly. Even Theon occasionally joins with his surprisingly strong baritone. Despite your growing fatigue, the social aspects of the afternoon provide mental stimulation that makes the physical burden more bearable. As your hands continue shaping clay, your mind stays engaged with the gossip, stories, and songs flowing around you. The shared experience of labor creates bonds that help everyone endure the harsh realities of commoner life in Macedonia. You glance toward the doorway, noting how the shadows have lengthened across the workshop floor. An essential skill in your world is reading the sun's position to tell time. With no mechanical clocks, the changing angle of light dictates the rhythm of all human activity. You mentally calculate that perhaps 2 hours of workday remain, enough time to finish your current batch of pots if you maintain your pace. The thought of evening's approach brings mild relief. Though your body aches and your hands are raw from constant contact with clay, you've survived another workday that would break someone from a softer age. The marketplace begins its transition from daytime commerce to evening wind-down. Merchants call final prices, willing to bargain rather than pack unsold goods. A woman walks past with a lamp, heading home to start her cooking fire before darkness falls completely. Her action reminds everyone that in a world without artificial lighting, the sun's fading light creates a natural deadline for all outdoor activities. The rhythm of life in Alexander's Macedonia beats in perfect synchronization with the sun's daily journey, a timekeeper more reliable than any human invention. Evening market and errands. As Theon finally calls the end of the workday, your arms ache with the familiar burn of having shaped clay for hours, but there's no time to rest yet. Your mother asked you to stop by the market on your way home, a task that's both a responsibility and a subtle compliment. She trusts your judgment with the family's precious few coins. "Don't forget what I'm owed," Theon says, handing you your day's earnings, 3 small bronze coins and a slightly larger silver one. You tuck them carefully into the hidden pocket sewn inside your belt. Getting robbed would mean your family goes hungry for days. The late afternoon market buzzes with frantic energy as everyone rushes to complete their transactions before darkness falls. The sun hangs low on the horizon, casting long shadows between the stalls. You have perhaps an hour of decent light left, not much time to stretch your meager earnings across your family's growing list of needs. You mentally calculate what you must buy versus what you can actually afford. Salt is non-negotiable. Without it, food spoils quickly in the Macedonian heat. A small flask of olive oil for both cooking and lamp fuel. Perhaps some lentils or beans to add substance to tonight's meal. And if there's anything left, a vegetable or two would be welcome. Your mother specifically mentioned garlic, both for flavor and because she believes it wards off illness. You have to leave enough for emergencies, you remind yourself. Last month, your youngest sister developed a fever that required expensive herbs from the medicine woman. Those unexpected costs meant eating nothing but watered porridge for a week. You navigate the market stalls with practiced efficiency, moving first to a vegetable seller you know from previous visits. His produce isn't the freshest, but his prices reflect that. "Looking for anything special today?" he asks, already pulling aside slightly bruised onions and odd-shaped carrots, the discounted options he knows you'll ask for. "What will you take for these?" you ask, pointing to the pile. "2 bronze pieces," he starts, the opening move in a familiar game. "1 bronze and I'll take that spotty cucumber too," you counter. The brief negotiation ends with you securing 3 vegetables for slightly less than the asking price. A small victory, but these tiny savings add up to an extra meal by month's end. Moving through the market requires constant awareness of both opportunity and danger. You sidestep a group of rowdy young men, probably day laborers with their first drink of the evening. Your hand instinctively moves to check your hidden coins. The currency situation adds another layer of complexity to your shopping. Some merchants deal only in silver coins, refusing the smaller bronze pieces that make up most of your payment. Others will accept goods in trade, a system you've used before, trading eggs from your family's chickens for items you couldn't otherwise afford. "Salt," you say to the merchant from the coastal regions. The smallest amount. He measures out a tiny portion of the precious white crystals into a scrap of cloth, twisting it closed before exchanging it for your silver coin. He returns 2 bronze pieces as change, less than you expected, but arguing rarely ends well for commoners like you. The smells of the food stalls hit you next, making your empty stomach contract painfully. Someone is roasting meat on an open fire, the fat dripping and sizzling on the coals. The aroma is maddening, rich, smoky, and completely out of reach. Prepared food is an unthinkable luxury for your family. The thought of spending money on something already cooked seems absurdly wasteful, though your mouth waters involuntarily as you pass. "Just keep walking," you mutter to yourself. A crowd has gathered around a merchant with armed guards flanking his exotic wares. His stall displays tiny packages of powder in vibrant colors, spices from the east that Alexander's campaigns have made available in Macedonia for the first time. You pause briefly, curious despite yourself. "Cinnamon from lands beyond Persia," the merchant announces to the gathered onlookers. "Pepper from islands where monkeys swing from trees." The smallest packet costs more than you earn in a month. You move on quickly before desire can take root. These luxuries belong to a different world than yours. You've noticed before how the market seems organized by types of goods. Recent archaeological findings will eventually confirm your observation. Macedonian markets featured designated areas for different goods, creating a structured system rarely described in historical texts. Pottery and metalwork occupy the eastern section, textiles to the north, food and spices clustered in the center. This organization isn't random, but carefully planned to facilitate commerce. With your essential purchases secured in a cloth bag, salt, oil, vegetables, and a small packet of lentils, you feel a modest sense of accomplishment. You've stretched your limited resources as effectively as possible, balancing immediate needs against potential future demands. You even have 1 bronze coin remaining, which you'll give to your mother for next week's emergencies. The light is fading rapidly now, the market thinning as vendors pack up unsold goods. You begin the walk home through increasingly dim streets. Darkness brings its own dangers in a world without street lighting. Drunk soldiers, thieves, or simply hazards you can't see in time to avoid them. You quicken your pace accordingly, one hand on your purchases, the other occasionally touching the knife tucked in your belt. A dog barks somewhere nearby, making you jump. From an alley comes the sound of arguing voices. You stick to the center of the street where you're most visible, walking with purpose. Macedonia after dark becomes a different place, governed by different rules. The protective social fabric of daylight hours thins with the sunset. Your shadow stretches long before you, then fades entirely as the last light disappears. You move faster, eager to reach the safety of your family's humble home, where a cooking fire and familiar voices await. Evening meal and family time. You arrive home as evening shadows stretch across the village, finding your family already gathered around the hearth. The main cooking pot hangs from an iron hook above crackling flames, steam escaping in delicate wisps that carry the promise of the day's most substantial meal. Your mother stirs the contents slowly, her face illuminated by the flickering firelight. The smell hits you immediately, a simple stew, but after a day of labor, it might as well be a royal feast. Good timing, your mother says, nodding at the bag of market purchases in your hand. Show me what you found. You unpack your modest treasures, the small cloth of salt, the flask of oil, vegetables and lentils. Your mother examines each item with careful attention, mentally calculating how to incorporate them into tonight's meal and tomorrow's. Nothing goes to waste in your household. Even vegetable peels will feed the chickens or enrich the small garden plot behind your home. The salt merchant raised his prices again, you explain, handing over the remaining bronze coin. I tried to bargain, but you trail off with a shrug that your mother understands completely. She takes the coin and tucks it away in her own hidden pocket. You did well, she says, the simple praise warming you more than you'd admit. The evening meal brings your entire family together in a way that no other daily activity manages. Your father returns from his labor in the fields, your siblings from their various chores and apprenticeships. Even your grandfather emerges from the corner where he's been napping most of the day, his bones too old and painful for much movement. Unlike the wealthy Macedonians you sometimes glimpse through open doorways, your family doesn't recline on cushioned couches while eating. Such luxuries remain firmly in the realm of fantasy. Instead, you sit on simple wooden stools arranged in a rough circle around the central hearth. The youngest children don't even get stools. They sit cross-legged on the packed earth floor, eagerly waiting for their wooden bowls to be filled. I saw one of Alexander's messengers ride through the north gate today, your brother announces as the stew is served. Covered in dust, looked like he hadn't stopped for days. Your father nods thoughtfully. News from the east, most likely. The army must have reached another city. Tonight's meal is a simple stew of lentils and vegetables with small pieces of preserved fish added for flavor rather than substance. Your mother has performed her usual miracle, stretching ingredients that should barely feed 4 into a meal that somehow satisfies all 8 of you. You know she'll claim to be full before taking her portion, saving the largest share for your father and the growing children. Your wooden bowl feels warm in your hands as you accept it, the steam rising to your face. The first spoonful burns your tongue slightly, but you don't mind. The combination of salt, herbs, and the day's exhaustion makes even this simple fare taste remarkable. Unlike breakfast or midday meals, dinner comes with conversation. The day's work is done, the pressure temporarily lifted, and tongues loosen accordingly. Your younger sister tells an animated story about chasing an escaped chicken through 3 neighbors' yards. Your brother complains about his master's impossible standards for apprentice work. Adults discuss practical matters: the leaking roof, the neighbor's new baby, the rumors of tax collectors coming next week. Your grandfather clears his throat, a sound that immediately quiets other conversations. At 70, he's the oldest person on your street, his memory stretching back to before Alexander's father Philip unified Macedonia. When he speaks, everyone listens. In my youth, he begins, his voice surprisingly strong despite his frail appearance, we didn't answer to Pella. Each village had its own ways, its own leaders. He shakes his head slowly. Before Philip brought his unity and Alexander his glory, we paid fewer taxes and saw fewer soldiers. Your father shoots him a warning glance. Such talk could be dangerous if overheard by the wrong ears. But here, within your home's mud brick walls, these stories serve a purpose. They remind the children that the world wasn't always as it is now, that change happens across generations. The bread accompanying your meal was baked earlier today in the community oven, a stone structure that multiple families share to conserve precious fuel. Your portion is slightly burned along one edge. Your mother probably couldn't secure a prime spot in the oven's rotation today. Still, the bread serves its purpose, soaking up the last of the stew's broth and extending the satisfaction of the meal. This sharing of baking facilities isn't just about practicality. Archaeologists and historians will later recognize how these communal activities created stronger social bonds among Macedonian commoners. While waiting for their bread to bake, women exchanged information, arranged marriages, and formed alliances that helped families survive hardship. The community oven served as both practical tool and social hub. As wooden bowls are wiped clean with the last pieces of bread, you feel the day's physical exhaustion settling into your bones. Your eyelids grow heavy, your muscles ache from hours at the potter's wheel, and your body demands rest. Yet despite these discomforts, there's a quiet contentment in this moment. Your family gathered safely, stomachs reasonably full, the uncertainties of tomorrow temporarily held at bay. The meal represents more than simple nourishment. It's a daily affirmation of family bonds, a rare moment when everyone exists in the same space with relatively little pressure. Despite its simplicity by any modern standard, this evening meal provides the day's greatest comfort, a brief respite from the constant struggle that defines commoner life in Alexander's Macedonia. Your mother collects the empty wooden bowls, stacking them for morning cleaning. Your father stretches his arms overhead, wincing at the audible pop from his shoulder. Your siblings begin preparing sleeping areas. Another day in Macedonia comes to its close, unremarkable in historical terms, but complete in its own simple way. Evening activities and entertainment. The last embers of the hearth glow orange in the darkness as your family settles in for the evening hours. Your home transforms with nightfall, illuminated only by the central hearth fire and a single oil lamp your mother has lit for essential tasks. The dancing flames cast moving shadows on the walls of your simple dwelling, creating phantom figures that seem to perform their own silent entertainment against the mud brick surface. Evening offers a precious window for recreation after the day's labor, though that window remains frustratingly narrow. Darkness limits what you can do, and the precious lamp oil, expensive and carefully rationed, must be conserved. Your mother has allowed just one small lamp tonight, its flame carefully trimmed to use minimal fuel while providing just enough light for necessary work. Your body cries out for rest after hours at the potter's wheel. Your muscles ache, your eyes feel gritty from clay dust, and your bed mat in the corner looks increasingly appealing. Yet social customs and household needs demand that you remain productive a while longer. In Macedonia, even leisure time must serve a purpose. Idle hands are a luxury few can afford. Your sister sits near the lamp, her fingers working nimbly to mend a torn tunic. Your brother uses a small knife to carve a wooden spoon, carefully shaping the handle into a simple geometric pattern. Your mother weaves a basket from reeds collected last week, her practiced hands barely needing light to find their way. These aren't merely pastimes. The repaired clothing saves precious drachmas, the carved implements might be sold at market, and the baskets provide both storage and potential income. Tell us about Heracles again, your youngest sister pleads to your grandfather, who smiles and settles more comfortably against the wall. Which adventure? The Nemean lion? The golden apples? He asks, though he knows which story she wants. The Hydra! Several voices call out at once. Stories flow freely in these evening hours, tales of mythological heroes who performed impossible feats and overcame terrifying monsters. Your grandfather tells of Heracles and his 12 labors, of clever Odysseus outsmarting the Cyclops, of Jason seeking the Golden Fleece. Mixed among these ancient tales are newer stories, exaggerated accounts of Alexander's conquests in lands so distant you can barely imagine them. They say Alexander found trees that bear wool instead of fruit, your uncle adds, having stopped by for an evening visit. And men with faces in their chests instead of their heads. No one quite believes these fantastic elements, but they make the stories more entertaining. The tales create mental journeys to places you'll never see with your own eyes, a brief escape from the confines of your village. From a small clay pot, your father produces a set of knuckle bones, the ankle bones of sheep, cleaned and polished through years of handling. He tosses them onto a flat wooden board, where they land with a satisfying clatter. These simple dice form the basis for numerous games popular among Macedonian commoners. 3 wolves and a goat, he announces, examining how they've landed. Who wants to play? You join in the game along with your older siblings. The rules are simple. Different combinations of the 4 sides, named after animals, yield different point values. Small pebbles serve as counting markers. Though your family plays for fun, you know many men gamble with knuckle bones at the tavern, sometimes losing a week's wages in a single night. Occasionally, these gambling disputes grow serious enough for village elders to intervene, a reminder that even simple games carry consequences in a world where every drachma matters. Speaking of the tavern, its sounds drift through your neighborhood as evening deepens. Someone is playing a flute, the melody winding through the darkness like a living thing. Men's voices rise in a familiar drinking song, followed by raucous laughter. An argument breaks out, voices shouting before being quickly hushed. These sounds form a familiar evening soundtrack for those too poor to participate but close enough to hear. Your father steps outside briefly and returns with news about tomorrow's weather. Clear stars tonight, especially around the moon. Should be dry tomorrow, good for firing the new pots. This weather prediction isn't merely small talk. A peculiar Macedonian tradition involves reading the night sky to forecast coming conditions, combining practical observation with elements of supernatural belief. Certain star patterns near the moon indicate rain, others promise clear skies. This knowledge, passed through generations, proves remarkably accurate, blending astrology with genuine atmospheric understanding in a way modern meteorologists might grudgingly respect. These simple evening entertainments, however modest by modern standards, provide necessary mental escape from physical labor. The stories transport you beyond your village. The games create moments of excitement and friendly competition. The handicrafts produce both useful items and a sense of accomplishment. Together, they create brief moments of joy in an otherwise challenging existence. As the fire burns lower and the oil lamp begins to flicker, your family's activities wind down naturally in response to the fading light. Your mother puts away her basket weaving, your father collects the knuckle bones, and younger siblings begin yawning openly. It's time to prepare for sleep. Everyone moves with practiced efficiency, rearranging sleeping mats around the room's perimeter. Your mother sweeps the floor quickly, checking dark corners for unwelcome creatures. Spiders and scorpions sometimes seek the warmth of human dwellings. Your father checks that the door is securely barred. Though your village is relatively safe, nighttime intruders aren't unheard of. As activities conclude and family members settle onto their mats, the day's cycle nears completion. Your body welcomes the approaching rest, your mind already drifting towards sleep, even as final murmured conversations fade around you. Tomorrow will bring identical challenges, but tonight's simple pleasures have provided the mental fortitude to face them anew. Night and sleep in ancient Macedonia. The last embers of the hearth glow orange in the darkness as your family settles onto sleeping mats arranged around the room's perimeter. The day's conversation fades to whispers, then silence. Your younger sister is already asleep, her breathing deep and rhythmic beside you. Your father stretches one final time before lowering himself onto his mat with a soft groan, the sound of a body worn down by years of physical labor. Sleep comes quickly to your exhausted muscles. The moment your head touches the thin cushion stuffed with straw, your consciousness begins to blur at the edges. But true comfort remains elusive in Macedonia. Your mattress, is little more than a sack filled with dried grass, lumpy in all the wrong places. The single woolen blanket you share with your sister provides minimal protection against the night chill that seeps through the mud brick walls. The darkness isn't complete. A faint glow from the banked hearth casts just enough light to make out the shapes of your family members. Unlike modern bedrooms with their privacy and personal space, your sleeping arrangement would shock people from the future. Everyone, children, parents, grandparents, shares this single room out of necessity. Your mother sleeps just an arm's length away, your father beside her. Your older brother's snoring has already begun, a familiar nighttime soundtrack. Night in Macedonia brings its own unique challenges. The sound of tiny rodent feet scurrying along the beams above makes you glance upward nervously. Mice are constant, unwelcome house guests, drawn to the stored grain and the warmth of human habitation. A mosquito buzzes irritatingly close to your ear. You swat at it half-heartedly, too tired for a proper battle. These minor discomforts blend with deeper worries that surface as sleep approaches. Will there be work tomorrow? Will the tax collector visit this week? Will your persistent cough develop into something worse? Through the partially open shutters, the night air carries distant sounds that form a symphony of Macedonian darkness. Dogs bark at unseen threats, perhaps a fox near the chicken coops, or simply shadows that trigger their protective instincts. From the direction of the tavern come occasional shouts and bursts of laughter that will continue until the wine runs out. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the call of the night watchman. The hour is late, all is well. These official timekeepers help those without access to water clocks track the passing night. As sleep overtakes you, your dreams form a strange mixture of the day's events and impossible visions. The clay pot you struggled with transforms into a living creature. Alexander himself appears, looking remarkably like your uncle, but wearing a golden crown. You find yourself flying over Macedonia, seeing your village from above like a bird. Modern scholars now understand that sleep patterns in pre-industrial societies differed significantly from our expectations today. Without artificial lighting to extend the day, your ancestors' relationship with sleep followed different rhythms. Macedonians typically slept from shortly after sunset until dawn, a longer period than most modern humans experience. Evidence suggests some practiced a form of segmented sleep with a wakeful period in the middle of the night. You might wake after several hours, stoke the fire, check on younger siblings, or even have quiet conversations with other wakeful family members before returning to sleep until morning. This pattern, far from being a sleep disorder, was the natural human cycle before electricity changed everything. The wooden shutters of your window remain partially open despite the night chill, a practical choice that serves multiple purposes. The small opening allows smoke from the evening's hearth fire to escape rather than filling the room completely. It also prevents the absolute darkness that many Macedonians found deeply unsettling. The distant stars provide minimal illumination, just enough to make out shapes if your eyes adjust fully. Some believe the open shutters also allow household spirits to come and go freely, though your family never discusses such superstitions openly. Despite the physical discomforts, the hard sleeping surface, the thin covering, the sounds of family members shifting around you, sleep provides the essential restoration your body needs. Human adaptability is remarkable. What would seem unbearable to someone accustomed to modern beds becomes simply normal to you. Your muscles relax, your breathing deepens, and your body begins repairing itself from the day's labor, preparing for tomorrow's identical challenges. As your consciousness fades completely, you're vaguely aware that thousands of others like you lie sleeping across Macedonia. Farmers, potters, weavers, blacksmiths, tanners, commoners whose collective labor sustains an empire. History will record Alexander's conquest of Persia in meticulous detail, while leaving no trace of your existence. No scrolls document the potter who made the cups from which his soldiers drank, the farmer who grew their food, or the weaver who created their cloaks. Yet without these countless unnamed lives, no empire could function. The rhythmic breathing of your family members surrounds you, a reminder that even in Alexander's Macedonia, survival depends on these small communal units supporting each other through countless nights like this one. Your father's occasional snore, your mother's softer breaths, your siblings' restless movements. Together they form a cocoon of familiar presence that represents the only true security available to someone of your station. Your final thoughts before complete sleep overtakes you drift to tomorrow, another day of labor at the potter's wheel, another cycle of meals, work, and brief evening respite. The awareness of this unending pattern doesn't bring despair, just acceptance. This is life as you know it, as your parents knew it before you, as your children will know it after. The names of kings may change, borders may shift, but the fundamental experience of the commoner remains a constant thread through Macedonia's history. Unrecorded but essential, forgotten but foundational. Reflection on survival in Alexander's world. Your breathing deepens as sleep finally claims you completely, your body surrendering to exhaustion while your mind processes the day's experiences. The weight of your limbs feels heavier against the straw mat, your muscles finally releasing the tension built up over hours of shaping clay at the potter's wheel. Around you, the soft sounds of your family's breathing create a gentle rhythm in the darkness. This single day you've just experienced represents one of thousands you'll live through if you're fortunate enough to reach old age. And that's a big if in Alexander's Macedonia, where disease, accident, or conflict might claim you at any moment. The average person doesn't get a dramatic death in battle like the stories sing about. Instead, it's often something mundane, an infected cut, a winter fever, a fall from a roof, that ends a commoner's story without ceremony. What's truly remarkable about your life isn't found in dramatic events, but in the persistent rhythm of survival. The daily negotiations with market vendors over copper coins, the careful management of your family's food stores, the constant calculation of how much lamp oil remains versus how many dark evenings lie ahead. These mundane challenges require a resilience that no battle ever could. Your existence unfolds entirely in the shadow of Alexander's conquests. While he marches east, claiming lands you'll never see, you're focused on making it to next month without starving. His campaigns will fill scrolls and be studied for millennia, while your daily struggles, the pots you shaped today, the water you carried, the bread you helped bake, leave absolutely no trace in history's record. Historians will know what Alexander ate for dinner before certain battles, but nothing of what sustained the thousands of commoners who made his empire possible. If you're extremely lucky, you might live to 35. By then, your body will be thoroughly worn down by labor, poor nutrition, and untreatable illnesses. Women face additional dangers from childbirth. Many don't survive their third or fourth delivery. What modern people consider middle age represents elderly status in your world. By 30, your teeth are already half gone, your joints ache constantly, and chronic coughs or digestive issues have likely become permanent companions. Without understanding germ theory, clean water practices, or basic medical interventions, your survival relies heavily on chance and folk wisdom. You drink from the same wells that animals use. You treat wounds with remedies that sometimes help and sometimes make things worse. You cope with pain using herbs whose properties were discovered through generations of trial and error. When serious illness strikes, prayers and sacrifices to healing gods might seem as effective as any available treatment. Historians still argue whether commoners in Alexander's Macedonia experienced their lives as hardship or simply accepted these conditions as the natural order of human existence. Did you wake each morning feeling oppressed by your circumstances, or was this simply life as you understood it to be? Without written records from ordinary people, this question remains unanswerable. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between an awareness of life's difficulties balanced against the lack of any alternative to compare it to. The evidence from commoner graves tells a stark, physical story. Archaeologists find spines permanently deformed from carrying heavy loads. Joints show signs of arthritis even in young adults. Teeth are worn down from coarse bread containing tiny stone particles from grinding wheels. Healed fractures set at odd angles reveal injuries that received minimal treatment. These silent witnesses suggest physical suffering was universal, an unavoidable tax paid simply for existing. My back hurts like this because everyone's back hurts like this, you might think, never questioning whether a different reality could exist. Yet within these harsh constraints, you find moments of genuine meaning. The family bonds strengthen through shared hardship, the satisfaction of contributing to your household's survival through your craft. The community connections that provide support when illness strikes or crops fail, the small pleasures of a festival day, a well-told story, or a particularly good batch of wine shared among friends. These aren't compensations for suffering, but rather the substance of human existence that persists regardless of historical era. Even physical pain takes on different meanings in this context. The ache in your shoulders from carrying water isn't just discomfort, it's evidence of your contribution. Calloused hands aren't simply damaged skin, but badges of useful labor. The human capacity to find dignity within difficulty doesn't diminish the reality of suffering, but it does reveal the remarkable adaptability that has allowed our species to survive. As your consciousness fades completely into sleep, your breathing naturally synchronizes with family members nearby. This unconscious alignment serves as a perfect metaphor for survival in Alexander's Macedonia. No commoner truly makes it alone. The interdependence of family units, the mutual support of neighbors, the shared knowledge passed through generations, these social bonds form the true infrastructure of survival, more essential than any road or aqueduct Alexander might build. Tomorrow you'll wake and begin again. Fetch water, shape clay, bargain at the market, share an evening meal. The cycle appears repetitive from outside, perhaps even meaningless when set against the grand conquests happening at the empire's edges. But within this rhythm exists the full measure of human experience. Work and rest, hunger and satisfaction, pain and pleasure, struggle and occasional triumph. As sleep claims you completely, this paradox resolves itself without need for philosophy. Your life in Macedonia may be invisible to history's writers, your name forgotten within a generation of your death, but in this moment, breathing alongside your family in the quiet darkness, you are undeniably, completely alive. And sometimes, that's victory enough. Conclusion. The rhythm of your breath slows as deep sleep takes hold. Your mind surrenders to darkness, your body already preparing for tomorrow. The clay dust still clings to your skin, your back still aches, but for these few hours you find peace. Your day, so ordinary in Alexander's Macedonia, reveals a truth often forgotten. Empires rise on the shoulders of those history never names. Every grand conquest, every magnificent monument, every celebrated victory exists because thousands of commoners like you woke up, worked, and survived another day. Maybe that's the most remarkable thing about your life. Not that it's hard or short, but that tomorrow you'll wake up and do it all again. Hey guys, tonight we begin with a simple invitation. Close your eyes unless you're driving and imagine this. A quiet room, a soft breeze slipping through the window, the gentle hum of a fan nearby. The outside world has dimmed. Your phone is just far enough away to ignore. And here in this hush, a story waits to unfold. Not the kind of story with battles and explosions, not dragons or lasers. No, tonight's story begins with silence, with eyes watching from the corner, with hands folded neatly in the shadows of the most powerful empire the world has ever known. You've likely heard the names, Caesar, Augustus, Nero, but their stories, loud and drenched in blood, are only half the tale. What about the others? The ones who did not raise swords, but raised empires. The ones who never sat on thrones, but whose words bent the will of emperors. The ones whose silence could kill, whose glances could crown. Tonight, we follow such a person. Her name was Livia Drusilla. She lived without armor, ruled without title, and died as a goddess. You may think you're tough, but tonight you may not survive the weight of her life. So before we fall into history's deep end, take a moment to like this video. Subscribe if you haven't, and if you do enjoy these Twilight journeys, drop your location and time in the comments. I love knowing which corners of the world are listening and how the night finds you. Now, turn off the lights. Let your fan hum a little louder. And let's begin tonight's descent into the ancient dark. They say power is loud, a sword crashing down, a speech that stirs armies. But sometimes power is quiet. Power is a woman who listens more than she speaks, a wife who never contradicts in public, a mother who smiles at the child, but places pieces on the board that shape empires. Power was born in 58 BCE with soft skin and sharp eyes. Her name was Livia Drusilla, daughter of the noble Claudian family, senators, generals, stewards of Rome's ancient name. She entered the world as the Republic was cracking under the weight of its own ambitions. Civil wars, betrayals, the old gods were losing their grip, and in that fracture new forces would rise. But Livia, she was not meant to rise, not in the way men did. She would not charge into the forum or lead armies. She would learn to exist behind the curtains. And even as a child, she understood. Visibility was vulnerability. Silence was safety. She sat through long meals, listening, noticing which senator drank too much, which general avoided eye contact, which servant moved too quietly to be harmless. She never gossiped, never interrupted, but she remembered. By the age of 15, Livia was married, not for love. That wasn't the way in Rome. She was given like land or horses, to Tiberius Claudius Nero, an older man whose politics were dangerously aligned with the fading shadows of the old republic. While the rising star Octavian, soon to be Augustus, tightened his grip on Rome, Livia's husband drifted further into the camp of the opposition. And so began her exile. While pregnant, Livia fled the city. Her husband was hunted. They slept under trees, dined on fear, and moved constantly. Her sandals wore thin, her spine ached. The baby inside her kicked when the roads turned rough. Still, she did not complain. Others broke down. Livia planned. In the evenings, while others whispered of dread, she calculated. She didn't pray for mercy. She thought of Octavian. She watched how he gathered allies, removed rivals, rewrote the narrative of Rome like a bard composing a new myth. She knew he wasn't a god, not yet, but he was clever. And if there was a way back into Rome, it would be through him. And fate, perhaps history itself, has a twisted sense of humor. Because not long after her exile began, Livia and Octavian met. Accounts differ. Some say it was a coincidence. Others claim it was arranged, but most agree. He saw her, and something shifted. She was still married, still visibly pregnant. But when Octavian looked at her, he didn't see scandal. He saw calm in the storm. A woman who had survived political chaos and emerged with dignity. A potential equal, not in name but in mind, and perhaps in something deeper. A scandal followed. Of course it did. The people whispered. Octavian had stolen another man's wife, that he'd welcomed her into his home before the birth of her child. But Rome had seen worse, and Octavian didn't care. Tiberius Claudius Nero, perhaps wisely, stepped aside, and soon Livia was married again, this time not to survive, but to rise. She entered the Palatine Hill not as a guest, not as a mistress, but as something new. A presence, a shadow, a whisper in the emperor's ear. And though Octavian would later be crowned Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, Livia would never be called empress. No title, no formal role, but she didn't need one. The true power she wielded came not from decree, but from trust, from silence, from knowing exactly when to step forward and when to disappear. But her rise had only begun. Tonight, we have merely opened the gate. The garden of power is vast, and its flowers often bite. In the heart of the eternal city, where sun-drenched columns cast long shadows across worn marble, a woman walked silently, her footsteps swallowed by stone. She did not wear a crown, no guards preceded her. And yet, when Livia passed, senators straightened their togas. Slaves held their breath, even the birds seemed to hush. Rome had crowned its new prince. Octavian, now Augustus, stood at the threshold of an empire he claimed was not a monarchy. With silver tongue and blood-soaked hands, he had ended the wars, declared peace, and proclaimed that the Republic lived on, even as he gathered all power into his grasp. And Livia, newly his wife, became the consort of the greatest magician Rome would ever know. But Livia had never been a decoration, and she would not start now. No sculptor was commissioned to cast her image in triumphal stone. No Senate decree granted her official powers. She bore no titles, issued no commands. Yet her presence curled around every decision made in the marble halls of power. The palace changed after she arrived, not dramatically, but subtly, as though the building itself were shifting to accommodate her breath. A private garden bloomed just off the emperor's study, fragrant with laurel and myrtle. A new corridor redirected foot traffic to pass a secluded shrine of Vesta. The scent of lavender hung in the air like a whispered warning. Someone is always watching. She dressed with simplicity, yet elegance. Her tunics lacked opulence, but were always spotless. Her posture was the posture of the Republic, composed, upright, unshakable. And though her mouth rarely smiled, her eyes missed nothing. In public, she was the model Roman matron. She honored the gods, attended ceremonies, upheld the mos maiorum, the ancestral customs. Women copied her braided hair. Men praised her modesty. Children learned her name before they knew their own. When Augustus introduced strict laws on morality, marriage, and adultery, he cited the need to protect Roman virtue. But behind the text, many saw her influence. And still, Livia said nothing. She never publicly took credit, never hinted at authorship. When senators praised her, she bowed her head in humility. But the moral laws reflected her values, or rather, her values shaped the laws. Rome was learning to behave the way she believed it should. But while the empire saw a mother of the nation behind the silk veils and ceremonial togas, something colder watched. One by one, Augustus's heirs began to fall. Marcellus, his nephew and presumed successor, died mysteriously at just 20. Official cause: stomach illness. Whispers suggested poison. Agrippa, the general and friend of Augustus, died soon after. Natural causes, they said. Perhaps age, perhaps ambition. But it was the deaths of Gaius and Lucius Caesar, Augustus's grandsons, that silenced the room. Both died young, promising, beloved, prepared for greatness, and gone. The grief was public. Black togas were worn. Temples echoed with funeral rites. But in the shadowed corners of the city, people murmured, "She is clearing the path." Because each death cleared the way for Tiberius, Livia's son by her first husband. A man of cold eyes and military habits, not beloved, not charismatic, but alive. Coincidence, some said. Destiny, said others. Destiny wears a mother's smile. Livia denied everything. She offered prayers, attended funerals with dry eyes and a steady hand. She touched no chalices, gave no orders. The empire mourned, she stood tall. But in whispered rooms, in late-night gardens, her name was spoken like a spell or a curse. And still, Augustus trusted her. He welcomed her into meetings no woman had ever attended, allowed her to read letters from governors, consulted her before senatorial decrees. She didn't argue with him. She simply made sure that later he believed the decision had been his all along. He once joked, "Livia listens like a priestess and speaks like a statue. I never know when she agrees with me until I realize I've already done what she wanted." And perhaps that was true. Her power wasn't noise, it was water, shaping stone, unseen. In private, Livia maintained records. Which governors owed money, which wives cheated, which generals plotted, not to wield, but to remember. Information to her was neither gossip nor threat. It was a forest, planted, nourished, waiting to be used. Augustus was not blind. He heard the rumors. He knew that some accused his wife of witchcraft, of murder, of ambition masked as loyalty, and yet he never turned away. He could have dismissed her, could have arranged an accident, could have removed the shadow beside his throne. But he did not. Because perhaps even the Emperor of Rome understood. There are some shadows you do not banish. There are some forces you welcome, not because they are tame, but because they are useful. So Rome looked to Augustus and called him divine. But Rome did not know. No shadow falls that long without a source. And that source, walking quiet through garden paths and torch-lit halls, dressed in pale linen and secrets, was Livia. They called her the mother of the empire, but in truth she was its mirror, its memory, its unseen spine. And she had only just begun. Power once secured does not remain idle. It shifts, it mutates, and for Livia it matured into something colder, more enduring. No longer merely the whisper behind the curtain, she became something else, a presence felt even in silence, a force indistinguishable from the very rhythm of Rome itself. As the decades passed, the city changed, but she remained the same. Her face barely aged. Her voice, always measured, never trembled. While other women in the imperial orbit were consumed by scandal or forgotten in dusty family trees, Livia endured like granite carved in flesh. The empire whispered of her now, not in gossip, but in reverence. She was called Mater Patriae, Mother of the Fatherland. Not officially, of course. The Senate never dared. But in private rooms and servants' kitchens, the phrase lived. Mothers told their daughters to walk like her. Governors sent gifts through discreet channels. Her approval, unspoken, was more valuable than an official decree. Augustus aged more visibly than she. His hair silvered, his back stooped, his illnesses came more frequently, and Livia, always near, always composed, was there to soften the blow. She answered letters when he was too weary, received dignitaries when he could not rise. Her signature never appeared on scrolls, yet her scent lingered on every parchment. Visitors to the palace noted changes they could not name. Rooms arranged more simply, food served more modestly. The air itself felt restrained, as if Rome had adopted Livia's breath. She hosted no lavish parties, she wore no foreign silks. But those who knew how the world turned saw it clearly. As Augustus faded, she remained constant. And the question now looming, like a storm on the far horizon, was succession. Augustus had spent decades avoiding the answer. His heirs, those of his blood or chosen through alliance, had been plucked from the vine, one by one. Some vanished through convenient illness, others fell into disgrace or exile. And then there were those who died suddenly, suspiciously, too young. The public grieved. Statues were draped in black. The vestals lit sacred flames in mourning. But in the back of their minds, the Roman people began to sense a pattern. Each death clears a path, they whispered, and at the end of that path stood Tiberius. Livia's son, a soldier, a bureaucrat, a man as gray in spirit as the togas he wore. He was not beloved. The people called him sullen. His smile was rare, his laughter non-existent. He did not woo crowds nor flatter the Senate, but he was disciplined, controlled, predictable, and most importantly, he was hers. Augustus hesitated. He had never warmed to Tiberius. Their relationship had always been brittle, filled with quiet disappointments. Augustus admired charm, wit, the ability to lead with a smile and rule with applause. Tiberius ruled like a man assembling bricks, methodically, without joy. But Livia never wavered. She did not pressure, she did not plead, that was not her way. She simply remained, close, constant, unblinking. When Augustus looked into the mirror, he saw a dying god. But when he looked beside him, he saw stability in a woman's form. It is said that in the emperor's final years, he turned more and more to Livia, not only for comfort, but for clarity. He began to speak of legacy, of Rome's eternity. He spoke of fire and marble, of laws and lineage, and she listened. She always listened. There is one moment, passed down through scribes and servants, recorded nowhere officially, yet whispered with remarkable consistency. One evening, as twilight soaked the Palatine Hill in lavender dusk, Augustus turned to her, his face pale, his breath thin. "Is this what you wanted?" he asked. She did not reply, not with words. Her gaze unwavering met his, calm, certain, not cruel, never cruel, but absolute. Augustus said no more. Days later, Tiberius was formally declared heir. The reaction across Rome was not joyful. The Senate murmured, the public shrugged, but no one rebelled. The path had already been cleared, and Livia remained serene. In the eyes of the empire, she had done what no woman before her had managed. She had placed her son on the throne of Caesar, without war, without bloodshed, without a single command spoken aloud. What others had sought through battle and betrayal, she had achieved through patience, silence, and precision. She did not celebrate. There was no triumph for her, no chariot, no laurel crown, only the continuation of Rome, the quiet satisfaction of a design fulfilled. And as Augustus's health declined, Livia sat beside him at every ceremony, every sacrifice, every final breath of public life. The emperor who had built an empire from ashes now faded like smoke in the evening sky, and behind him, unmoved, stood his shadow, the shadow who would outlive him, the shadow who would guide the empire still. The death of Augustus was not simply the end of a man, it was the end of a myth. For over 4 decades he had shaped Rome with quiet tyranny and public grace. He called himself princeps, first citizen, while ruling like a god. His face appeared on coins, his name was whispered with reverence. He did not rule like the Caesars who came after. He was Rome, a living monument to peace built upon graves. And now he was gone. They say he died peacefully in Nola, far from the Senate's fire and the crowds of the Forum. He was surrounded by the olive trees of Campania, the breath of summer still heavy in the air, and of course Livia was with him. She had never left his side. There are many versions of his final words. Some claim he said, "Have I played my part well?" Others say he whispered her name. And a few insist he said nothing at all, only looked at her and closed his eyes. But whatever he said, when that last breath left his body, the world shifted. The Senate entered mourning. Statues were draped in black, trumpets fell silent, the imperial standard was lowered, and the empire held its breath. The funeral procession was like none Rome had ever seen. Augustus's body was brought back to the capital along the Via Appia, accompanied by soldiers, priests, and citizens alike. The streets were lined with mourners, but among the weeping there were also whispers. Now we will see who truly rules. Livia returned to Rome not as a widow, but as Augusta. It was a title she had earned through years of silence, sacrifice, and calculation. The Senate confirmed it without protest. She was no longer just the wife of a god, because Augustus had been declared divine upon his death. Livia, therefore, was the widow of a god, a living bridge between man and eternity. She did not wear black. Instead, she appeared in public veiled in white, the color of priestesses. She made offerings in the temples with steady hands. She stood at the funeral pyre like marble carved into woman's form, and in her eyes there was no grief, only presence. The people looked at her and whispered, "She is not mourning, she is ascending." Augustus had left behind a world restructured in his image, but it was Livia who carried the map, and now that he was gone, she walked it alone. Tiberius, her son, now wore the purple. He had been named heir years before, reluctantly accepted by Augustus, and even more reluctantly by the Senate. He was not loved. He had no charm. He gave no stirring speeches. He lacked warmth. But he was the last man standing, and he had Livia's blood. His rule began in uncertainty. He avoided the crowds, avoided the city. He did not return to Rome immediately after Augustus's death. He lingered, waiting for the signs, the omens, the correct political climate. And while he hesitated, Livia acted. She appeared in the Senate, not to speak, but to observe. Her mere presence calmed tensions. When decisions stalled, it was her household staff who carried messages to key magistrates. When arguments arose, it was her approval, silent and unseen, that decided the outcome. She began to issue orders, not officially, but through suggestions no one dared ignore. She managed imperial correspondence, supervised temple rituals, and revised laws behind the curtain. Her handwriting began to appear more often than her son's. For many, the question arose, is Tiberius the emperor or the heir to her will? At first, Tiberius tolerated it. He owed her everything, after all. His position, his legitimacy, the very empire. He knew he had not built it. She had placed it in his lap. But power, once grasped, grows restless. He resented the glances, the whispers, the subtle shifts in posture when she entered a room. He hated that ambassadors brought her gifts, not his. That foreign rulers sent letters with her name included, as if she were his co-ruler, as if she were above him. Worse still, he began to see her in every corner. He would announce an appointment, only to find she had already suggested the name. He would craft a law, only to realize it echoed one she had spoken of weeks earlier. He withdrew from meetings, spent more time in his villa in Capri, spoke of omens and destiny, consulted astrologers, and still, she remained, always calm, always respectful, always just within reach, but never fully within grasp. She never confronted him, never opposed him publicly. But every time he tried to act independently, her shadow fell across the scroll. This was not a war of swords, it was a war of wills. And in such a war there are no victories, only endurance. Some say Tiberius began to dream of her, that he saw her face in mirrors, that he muttered her name in his sleep. Others say he avoided looking at her directly, for fear he would see the truth, that he was emperor in name, but she ruled in essence. Rome itself was unsure. Officially he was princeps. Unofficially they called her Imperatrix Occulta, the hidden empress. She never acknowledged the name. She didn't need to. She walked the city with calm dignity, attended rituals, corrected priests, listened to citizens. She became a symbol, not of a mother, not of a widow, not of a queen, but of continuity. Augustus was dead, but his will lived on, and that will wore Livia's eyes. The people respected her, the Senate feared her, and Tiberius, he tolerated her, for now. But somewhere, deep within the walls of the palace, the air had changed. The space between them was widening, the warmth of family replaced by a cold equilibrium. And in that distance, a new shadow began to form. One not of reverence, but of resistance. The years that followed were defined not by conflict, but by silence. Not the peace of contentment, no. This was the silence of withheld breath, of rooms too large for conversation, of glances that landed and lingered too long. The kind of silence that grows not from understanding, but from things left unsaid for too many years. Tiberius, now the official ruler of the Roman Empire, governed from a distance, physically, emotionally, politically. His body may have remained in Rome for a time, but his mind had already crossed the sea to Capri, to seclusion, to shadows, to isolation. He withdrew from the Senate, from the people, from his mother. Livia, in contrast, stayed. She remained in Rome, in the palaces, in the ceremonies, in the minds of the citizens. She was still Augusta, still the living link to Augustus, the divine. And though the city changed, growing, decaying, rebuilding itself, she remained a fixture, like an altar too sacred to be moved. At first, the tension between mother and son was subtle, opaque. Tiberius delayed replying to her letters. He refused her audience when she asked to speak in private. He altered decrees she had helped shape. He claimed he was too busy, too tired, or not in Rome at all. But it grew. Soon he stripped her of access to certain archives, dismissed her trusted servants, reassigned officials close to her to distant provinces. The web she had spun so delicately began to fray, not from scandal, not from rebellion, but from indifference. And this, perhaps, was the cruelest form of rebellion, to erase her without speaking her name. Livia had survived civil war, imperial court intrigue, the deaths of heirs, and the suspicions of an empire. But this quiet denial cut differently. Still, she did not retaliate. She never confronted him, never accused, never wept in public. Instead, she carried on with the rituals. She maintained the family shrines, oversaw public games in Augustus's honor, sent letters to provincial governors, some of whom still responded with deference. And when ambassadors from the East arrived in Rome, they still requested a private moment with the Augusta. Tiberius's answer was always the same: she is resting. But she was not. She was watching, waiting. Power, Livia had always known, was not declared. It was felt. It lived in the room like incense, perceived by those who understood its weight. And in this chapter of her life, she became something rarer than ruler or regent. She became a relic, not a fossil, not a memory, but a living artifact, both venerated and feared. She walked slowly now, but when she entered a room, people still fell silent. When she raised her voice, the scribes still paused their quills. Rome had grown used to her presence, and as all empires do, it had built myths around it. Whispers swirled in bathhouses and libraries. She cursed her son. She speaks with ghosts. She never sleeps. She wears the same robe Augustus died in. She is already dead, but Rome hasn't noticed. None of it was true. And all of it was true. Because Livia no longer lived in the present. Not really. She lived between eras, between dynasties, between gods and men. She wrote her will with careful language. She dictated donations to temples, bequests to servants. She instructed that statues of Augustus be cleaned and maintained. She asked that her body, when the time came, be buried beside his. But she never once mentioned Tiberius, not in reprimand, not in blessing. She simply omitted him, like a name forgotten, or perhaps never spoken aloud. Some say she hoped to reconcile, that her letters continued, even when unanswered, that she kept a chair beside her reading table, should he ever return. Others say she had already let him go, that the boy she had carried, raised and crowned, had long since vanished beneath the weight of power. By now, Livia was in her 80s, an age almost mythical for a Roman woman. Her hair had thinned, her steps shortened, but her eyes remained as they had always been, unblinking, unforgiving, undimmed. She had seen emperors rise and fall, had watched gods made from men and men destroyed for being too human. She had walked through fire, dressed in linen, and emerged untouched. And now she waited. Not for forgiveness, not for redemption, but simply for the end. The silence between her and Tiberius had become complete. They did not speak, they did not write, they did not acknowledge one another, even as the empire looked back and forth between them, confused, wary, expectant. It was a standoff not of weapons, but of willpower. And Livia, as ever, held firm. She had been a wife, a mother, a patroness, an Augusta. But more than any of that, she had been Rome's quiet pulse. The breath that continued after the shout. The gaze that lingered after the sword was sheathed. And as her body began to fade, that presence only grew. She was no longer simply a woman. She was a legend. And legends, as Rome knew all too well, never die easily. By the time Livia entered her final years, the empire had changed. Rome itself had changed, but she remained. It was not just age that weighed on her now, it was memory. She had outlived emperors, children, rivals, gods. The marble halls she once walked daily now echoed with the footsteps of others, names she didn't know, faces she no longer cared to remember. Her days became a ritual. She lived in a modest villa on the Palatine Hill, the same hill where Rome's first emperors once ruled, where she had once stood beside Augustus beneath the shadow of the laurel tree he planted to mark his victory at Actium. The tree still stood, twisted, a little dry, but alive. Each morning Livia rose at the same hour. She dressed slowly without assistance, white linen robes, clean, unadorned. She brushed her thinning hair and looked in the mirror, not to admire, but to remember. Her face was lined now, not heavily, but like paper folded many times. Each crease a year, each shadow a memory. She walked the same path through the garden every morning. She paused before the same shrine. She whispered the same words. But whether they were prayers, regrets, or messages to the dead, no one knew. Her servants moved like shadows, quiet, respectful, afraid. They spoke in hushed tones. "She hasn't eaten today." She was talking to herself again. She asked if we still had the old funeral veil. No visitors came. The Senate no longer requested her guidance. The priests no longer asked for her blessings. The statues built in her honor still stood, but none bowed before them now. And Tiberius? He remained in Capri. He sent no letters, no messengers, not even a physician. When informed of her condition, he was said to have shrugged. "Let her rest," he told the courier. She always said she preferred silence. Whether he meant comfort or cruelty, no one could say. Rome, however, remembered. Even if its rulers did not, the people remembered. They remembered the woman who had been there through plague and war, through transitions and betrayals. The woman who had become a fixture of the empire, like the Tiber, like the Forum, like the temples. They began to prepare. The Vestal virgins gathered sacred incense. Priests rehearsed ancient rites. Artisans scrubbed her statues clean, repainted worn inscriptions, relit the torches at her altars. Though she still breathed, Rome was already dressing itself for mourning. Livia, aware of this, said nothing. But she did ask one thing, that her funeral clothes, a simple white robe and a veil embroidered with stars, be brought out and aired in the sun. She did not explain. She simply touched the fabric, nodded, and had it folded again. She ate less, slept more, spoke less, but when she spoke, her words were as clear and sharp as ever. "Do not fear death," she told her handmaid once. "It is not an end, it is a translation." She wrote her final letters by hand, one to the high priest of Jupiter, requesting an offering be made in Augustus' name, one to a childhood friend long dead, never sent, and one left sealed, unaddressed, placed at the foot of her private altar. The contents were never revealed. Some say it was a confession, others a warning. The final night came without thunder. There was no earthquake, no eclipse, no comet, just a quiet sky and the sound of wind rustling through old laurels. She lay in her chamber alone. The oil lamp burned low. And before dawn, without pain, without a cry, Livia Drusilla exhaled once, and did not inhale again. Her hand, they said, was still resting on the edge of the bed, fingers curled not in tension, but as if grasping something invisible. Peace, power, memory, no one knows. She was 86 years old. When the servants found her, the house fell into silence, so complete it felt like stone. Even the birds outside did not sing. The news spread quickly, but not with panic, with reverence. Temples lit candles, the Senate adjourned, poets recited her lineage, and across the empire, from the deserts of Egypt to the foggy edges of Britannia, word traveled, "The Augusta is gone." But Rome knew better. She wasn't gone, not really. Because you cannot bury a shadow that has become the shape of an empire. She had been wife to a god, mother to an emperor, guardian of a golden age, and now perhaps something more, something even Rome, with all its altars and sacrifices, could not quite name. But it would try. They did try. Rome, a city practiced in the ritual of memory, did what it always did when confronted with something greater than life. It began to build a myth. The death of Livia Drusilla was not just an ending, it was a challenge. Because how do you bury someone who had already become a monument? How do you light a pyre for a woman who burned brighter than any torch? In the days after her passing, the question on every lip was the same. Will she be deified? Augustus had been. The Senate had declared him a god the moment his body cooled. His temples still stood, his priests still offered daily incense. His name was invoked in oaths and carved into stone. Livia had been his wife, his advisor, his mirror. She had shaped the empire from its cradle. Surely, surely she deserved the same fate. The Senate convened, petitions were drawn, resolutions drafted, the priesthoods prepared rites, the people expected it. But then Tiberius spoke, and he said no, he would not allow her to be deified. There would be no sacred flame in her honor, no temple, no statue with the label Diva Augusta, no festival days, no hymns. He said she herself would not have wanted such honors. She lived simply, let her memory rest. But Rome did not believe him. In taverns they whispered, he cannot forgive the woman who made him emperor. Even in death she unsettles him. This is not modesty, it is vengeance. The more generous suggested he acted out of grief, that he could not bear to see her name elevated among the stars, because he had spent years trying to eclipse her on earth, that refusing her divine honors was his way of keeping her human, imperfect like him. But whatever the reason, the result was clear. Livia was denied godhood, at least officially, because Rome, that city of alleyways and altars, had its own mind. The Senate may have bowed to Tiberius, but the people did not. They lit candles beneath her statues anyway. They placed offerings, fruit, oil, garlands at the base of her shrines. They whispered her name in moments of uncertainty. Women invoked her during childbirth. Men swore by her in business deals, believing she protected contracts and homes. In private homes, household gods, the Lares, began to share their corners with tiny clay busts of Livia. Her image stood beside those of Augustus and Vesta, as though the divine had simply made space. Even priests, those most bound to tradition, began to speak her name during prayers to the imperial family. Softly, carefully, but they said it. May the spirits of Augustus and Livia guard the empire. And Tiberius? He said nothing. He remained in Capri, as he had for years, far from the Senate, far from Rome, far from her memory. He ruled in name, but the empire had turned its face away, and into that silence stepped another, Claudius, the most unlikely of emperors, born with a limp, considered a fool, laughed at in court. But he watched, he read, he waited. He was the nephew of Tiberius, but more importantly, he was grandson by marriage to Livia. He remembered her, not just as a symbol, as a person. He remembered her voice in the corridors, her posture at family dinners, the calm with which she spoke even as others blustered. And when Claudius became emperor after the bloody chaos that followed Caligula's assassination, he moved quickly, not to raise taxes, not to reform the army, but to resurrect a woman who had not asked for it. He summoned the Senate. He stood before them, voice trembling, hands shaking, and he said, "She was wronged. She was denied what was owed. Let us make it right." The senators, unsure at first, nodded, then clapped, then voted. Livia Drusilla Augusta was to be deified. At last, Diva Augusta, she was granted a temple, festivals, a flamen, a priest dedicated solely to her. Her name was carved in stone beside Augustus's. Coins were minted with her image, crowned with stars. Rome had its goddess. Some said her statue wept that night. Others claimed lightning struck the old laurel tree on the Palatine Hill. Still others whispered that the air in her temple always smelled of myrrh, even when no offerings were present. But myths, like roots, twist quickly through history. It no longer mattered what was true. She had become what all rulers, male or female, secretly crave. Not obedience, not even victory, but immortality. Silence settled over Rome, but Livia's shadow lived on. In the years after her deification, the temple of Diva Augusta stood ivory and gold against the sky. At dawn, rays of sun would strike the marble steps where once a humble girl from the Claudian house had walked. Now mothers crept into that temple's hush, newborns in arms, to whisper prayers at the feet of Livia's statue. They brought small offerings, a pinch of incense, a lock of infant hair, and pleaded for guidance from the woman who had become a goddess. In those moments, Livia Drusilla lived anew in each hope and hushed invocation. Seasons turned, emperors came and went, some wise, many wicked, but through it all her cult endured. At the festival of her remembrance, respectable matrons wove myrtle into their braids the way Livia once did. Senators, even those who had never seen her alive, poured wine in her honor and murmured oaths by her name. In far provinces, travelers would swear they'd glimpsed a woman in white wandering at the edges of sacred groves, a gentle guardian spirit watching over Rome's forgotten outposts. Myth tangled with memory. Diva Augusta was no longer just a woman who had wielded quiet power. She became power's very personification, a myth in her own right. Yet even myths face the erosion of time. Generations later, new gods and new faiths rose in the empire. The altars of the old pantheon cracked and gathered dust. Livia's temple, like so many others, saw its fires go cold. The prayers fell silent, the title Diva Augusta faded from common speech. Marble can crumble, and empires themselves are mortal. The world moved on. But true immortality is a peculiar thing. It does not reside in stone or ritual alone. It lives in the stories that refuse to die. and Livia's story did not die. Though her temple eventually collapsed and her priesthood disbanded, her influence merely slipped into new forms. Medieval scribes copying annals of Rome paused on her name, perhaps in secret admiration or fear. Renaissance scholars dusted off scrolls and found her there, the quietly pivotal Augusta, the whisper behind the throne, and marveled at her subtlety. In every retelling, her legend grew. The mother of an empire who ruled from the shadows and outwitted death itself. 1,000 years passed, then another. Rome's marble ruins slept under twilight, but Livia Drusilla was awake in the minds of those who studied the past. In libraries lit by lamplight, historians debated her character. Was she the devoted matron and wise counselor inscriptions made her out to be? Or did she earn the whispers of poison and intrigue that clung to her name? The answers shifted with each generation's telling, yet the questions kept her spirit stirring. Even as reality and legend intertwined, Livia remained impossible to forget. And now, tonight, here in this very moment, she lives again in our imagination. Listen closely. Can you feel the faint brush of her robes as her story wraps around us? We resurrect her with each word. In the quiet of this room, as you heard of emperors and conspiracies, perhaps you sensed her presence, subtle, observing, undying. 2 millennia ago, she sought immortality through divinity and remembrance. She succeeded. We prove it by remembering her now. The night deepens. The fan hums low, and the world beyond your window is still. Livia's long journey, from a watchful girl in a collapsing republic to an honored goddess of the Roman people, has finally come to rest. Her tale has been whispered from one century to the next, carried like a flame through the dark. That flame now passes to you. Close your eyes and picture her, a woman in white, face calm and eyes sharp, standing at the edge of a torch-lit hall. She meets your gaze through time. You nod just slightly, and in that tiny gesture across ages, she is acknowledged. Livia Drusilla is seen. Livia is remembered. That is her immortality. And in the soft darkness, with history's weight behind us and dawn still distant ahead, we lay her story gently to rest. The empire she quietly shaped has long fallen to dust, but her shadow remains, endless and ever-present, as long as stories have the power to carry her name. Tonight, you walked with a goddess in the gardens of ancient power. And though our journey through the past now comes to an end, her silent footsteps echo on in the corridors of your mind. Sleep now, if you can, under the watch of Livia's eternal star. Her story will be waiting in the silence, a reminder that some shadows, once cast, outlast even the brightest light.